Hello everyone! Welcome to today's video. It is day 2 of being in India and it was a very packed day today. We did a lot of things. I had to spend some time to relax after the day before I started speaking because there was just a lot. I ended up going to breakfast closer to 7:30 than the requested 7 o'clock, which honestly was okay. It was a buffet. You show up when you need to. It was a buffet for breakfast, so I ended up finding a seat at a table with other people from the group so I could talk with them while I was eating. I got a variety of stuff. I got some pastries, some that were done a little bit unusual to me, but also some classics just so I know there'd be something that I would enjoy eating. I got some plain yogurt and I also got some watermelon juice, which isn't just like water. It's the pulpy watermelon juice where it looks red and not just like water with a hint of watermelon in it, but it was tasty. I also got some fruit that I don't typically see. One was dragon fruit, I recognize that, and the other one, I had no idea what it was. I didn't like that particular one. I was alright with the dragon fruit. It's more of a texture than a taste, but the other one was just, no, not for me. And I also had a lassi. Yesterday when I was on the airplane, the last Bollywood movie that I was watching had the male lead singing like, "They call me a lassi drinker," and I was like, what is that drink? So I got it when I saw that it was there on the breakfast options for the buffet. I was assuming that was an alcoholic drink, but it wasn't. It's actually a yogurt, and it's a very sweet yogurt. It was amazing, although it was hard to drink. It came in like a milk bottle would be the best description for it. But I shook it up thinking that it would be enough to actually get everything mixed and settled, but no, it was still really thick. And the person sitting next to me said she could see the liquid inside, and I'm holding it up and it's like still there, still there, still there. And then it all came at once and it was just too much and I had to lean forward and it was a mess, but it was funny. Thankfully, I did not spill too much. I ended up having to stick a knife inside and stir it around just so it would be thin enough for me to drink. I almost want another one. Well, hopefully it'll be there tomorrow for breakfast. Then after that, I got ready for the day. We were told this was going to be our first day interacting with Indian crowds, which meant that some things would be different. We drove through the city to get to our first stop, which was the Red Fort. And the Red Fort has been around since the 1600s. But on our way to the Red Fort, we ended up seeing a bunch of men. They were all dressed in white. We were told later on that they were Muslims. They were a particular sect of Muslims that started because they were forcibly converted from Hinduism, but now they are just actually Muslims by choice. They just had loads and loads of buses at first, and they were all getting out. But the buses themselves were in rough shape. It's like you could just tell through the window, you look at the seat and it's like, ooh, that looks like a seat you would want to reupholster. But then it was just like hundreds and hundreds of men that all just going through. We were told that they were either going to protest outside of the parliament, or they're going to start a spiritual pilgrimage or a spiritual journey at that particular spot. It was just a lot to see going on there. We did get some background on India on our ride to the Red Fort. India is the world's biggest democracy because they have the largest population. They have both a president and a prime minister, but the prime minister holds most of the power. What the president is actually in charge of is the military, which makes sense. The president is in charge of the military for the United States as well. The commander-in-chief is what they call it. But the president in the states also can affect the legislature, and I don't think the president in India can do that. I think that's the job of the prime minister. We also learned that India used to have more land than it actually has now. Both Bangladesh and Pakistan used to be part of India, and they used to go by different names. So Bangladesh used to be East Pakistan and Pakistan used to be West Pakistan. But when West Pakistan was the only Pakistan, they dropped the West from their name, and Bangladesh, when they got their freedom from India, they became Bangladesh. The plan was to get some golf carts. The terms golf carts, rickshaws, and tuk-tuks were all used relatively interchangeably, but it was to get some sort of vehicular transportation around the Red Fort, but that didn't happen on the way there. because for some reason today, our tour guide was told that the transportation would be delayed and would have a later start. So we walked around, and we have at least 3 people who struggle with walking long distances. They're using canes to keep going, so we can't walk terribly fast. We walked around, and the red fort lives up to its name. It's really red. It's a very distinctive red. It reminds me of like a brick red, like a lighter brick red. And there's a moat outside. It used to be filled with water, and they had crocodiles in it in the past, but it's just a grassy field now. And we walked around, saw the different buildings. It was very hazy. I'm not used to the general sky looking so hazy. I guess that's the pollution in the air, maybe? Across the way, we could see a Hindu temple, and next to the Hindu temple was a Ferris wheel. It was a very weird juxtaposition, and they were both in use at different times. Because on our way back, we saw the Ferris wheel spinning around, and on the way there, the temple was playing music. And we ended up having to go through security to go into the Red Fort, because part of the Red Fort is actually still an army installation. They don't let the public into all parts of the fort. There's just parts of the fort that they allow the public to see that have historical value, but the rest of it is actually being used for training. But when we went through security, it was weird in that they had us separate into ladies and gentlemen, or ladies and gents. And it was weird with security just separating by gender. When we walked in, the men just had to go through a metal scanner, but there was no other thing. While the ladies had a metal scanner, and then we had to walk into a tent. So I think part of it was maintaining modesty for the ladies who are being frisked, but they don't really care about modesty in the same way for the men. But it also just seemed like a formality, because you walk through a metal detector very fast. And in a more Western country, you stand back 6 feet, you wait for the machine to clear, and then you go through. No such thing here. It's just boom, boom, boom. Like, I was standing waiting for it to clear, and then there's a lady literally touching me right here as she like walked up, and I'm realizing the concept of personal space that I have is not the same concept of personal space that Indians have. Because when you're in a Western country, it's like, give me my space, like arm length. But India is the most populated country in the world. It's probably quite a privilege to demand that amount of space. So people, when they're talking to you, they're actually standing within 2-3 feet, like standing really close. And it's like, oh, okay. This just occurred to me, but I am now curious as to how India managed with COVID. Because practically no one's wearing a mask now. Some people are wearing masks every so often. There are some that you see. And there are people who are wearing face coverings that act as masks, but they're not like medical masks. Yeah, it's just a completely different concept of space. On our walk around the Red Fort, we were told ahead of time, take care of your belongings. Be careful of pickpockets, we were told, because our tour guide has had his phone pickpocketed twice. But also just making sure that you know where your wallet is and whatnot. And they told us that like our bus driver and the person who, I guess his role is like as a concierge, just making sure that the passengers have what they need and go up into the bus without falling down. They would stay with the bus, and that the bus would be locked, so you could leave belongings there. So I actually left my wallet on the bus. It was very strange to be walking in a foreign country without holding any money or without holding my wallet. Because when I travel alone, that's one of the things I use to keep me feeling safe. But it felt generally freeing because I knew I just had to stick with the group of people that I was with. I also just kept my phone in the little name pouch that I had to wear, so that wasn't necessarily in my pocket. And it's like, if it's right in front of me, I'll know that it's there. The other thing that we were told is that we would be approached because as a white Westerner who's visiting India, we stand out. We do not blend in. They know we are from somewhere else. And we're told that if we get approached asking to buy something from them or to have our photo taken, to say no. Because if one person gets permission, a whole group is going to come and flock and take pictures, and the tour guide won't be able to help us get out of that. The locals aren't going to listen to the tour guide in order to continue with our schedule that we have, which is flexible, but there's still a schedule. So if I hadn't been told that, I might have been more willing to be an object of curiosity, but I am a bit of a rule follower, and especially if the person who's responsible for making sure that I make it through another country safely is telling me not to do something, I'm not gonna do it. As you can imagine, if being a white Westerner is unusual, it's definitely unusual when your hair is an unnatural color. I'm not the only person in the group with an unnatural hair color. Another one of the ladies has a nice magenta color on the tips of her hair with a darker purple with the roots. I just saw it happen almost in slow-mo. Time slowed down for me as I saw this very quick event. There was this teenage girl and she made a beeline for the other lady in our group and she's like, photo? Photo? And our tour guide heard and is like, no, no. So when the Indians approach us, they're not taking a photo and then charging us for a copy of the photo. They're not doing anything like that. They just want it as a curiosity for themselves. It didn't take long for it to happen to me. While we were waiting for him to get tickets, this woman in a sari came up to me and was like, photo, and before I knew, her husband was right across the way, so I just turned and she took my photo. I was like, oh, okay. It ended up being quick before I even realized what was happening. One of the other ladies ended up taking a picture with a woman in a sari, and the woman in the sari approached her. When she tried to walk away, she's like, wait, I want a photo with you on my phone. So they ended up taking another picture of them, and they were in some beautiful saris. We walked into the Red Fort from there. The first area that we walked into was the entrance room. So it's where the king welcomed all his guests, and there's room for a bunch of drummers, so there'd be music, and it was also a raised platform so the archers could be up high for protection. It opened into a passageway that became the marketplace for all the ladies of the palace, because female royalty apparently were not allowed to leave the confines of the fort, the exception of like chariot racing or whatnot. So all the markets came for 2 or 3 days, and then they sold everything down for the queen, princess, the king's concubines, and other servants. They all could buy stuff, and they had a second level, and that's where they would sleep during the couple days that the market people were there. So that was from the entrance. It goes straight into that tunnel that was a marketplace, and it is still being used as a marketplace today. They are selling loads of things there. We ended up going outside of the fort because some people needed to use the restroom at that point, and there's a little bit of confusion, but we all ended up going to across the way to some seats. We were waiting in order to wait for the people to come back from the bathroom. And that's when I got asked again for another picture. These 4 Muslim boys came up to me, and I know they were Muslim because they were wearing the same garb that we saw on the way. And I was like, oh no, thank you. And one of them tried to come around and take a picture of me as like a selfie. I just ducked out of the way and went towards the group of people that I was staying with. So they stood there, and they may have taken a picture of me anyway. I really don't care. As long as I know that I followed the rules that I was given, I was fine. But they stayed there and ended up asking our tour guide for permission to take a picture. And he said no, and he sent them on their way. He told us that if it was a group of ladies who wanted to take a photo, it was fine. But the men and the boys, no. We can't let them do that. It's like, oh, okay. And then we ended up walking to the king's throne. It reminds me of a Greek temple, like the Parthenon, where you have this big slab of stone with a bunch of columns, but no like walls, and another slab of stone on top. But there's a bunch of columns like all inside the middle too, so that way the whole thing was supported. And we saw the king's throne that was there. It was a different color than the rest of the building. The building was a reddish color and the throne was a white marble, and there's some gem inlays in the table that was in front of it, but the king's throne you couldn't touch. They had a glass covering over it so that way no one could touch it, and even with the glass covering there was still a rope, so that's like you only go this far. It was also close to then, right before we reached then, that I got approached for the 3rd time. There was a guy who walked by, he looked back at me and I could see him looking at me, but then he asked me as I was filming for the montage that you're going to see a little bit later on in this video, he ended up asking me, hey could we take a photo? And I said, no, thank you. And I was told he went, oh. One of the other ladies in the group saw the whole interaction. She thought it was hilarious. I was like, yeah, sorry, dude. We ended up seeing 3 burnt out palaces or something like that. It was buildings that were in use, but then there's a huge fire, so the insides were burnt out, but they repaired some of it so you could piece together what it would look like in its restored glory. The colors are very vivid, like you could tell it was redone. The colors would not be that vivid if it was that old on white marble, but the erosion is not really there. The carvings are still very distinct. White marble is pretty durable. We did have to pause on our walking back because one of the ladies was suffering from heat stroke, so we did have to spend some time in the shade, and our tour guide made it his mission to make sure that we had rickshaws on the way back. So we ended up waiting for rickshaws, but here's another thing that's different. In Western society, it's like, oh, you stand a little bit back, you let it empty, like everyone get off, and then you go on. So our tour guide is trying to negotiate with the drivers of the rickshaw, but that has nothing to do with the entrance of the passengers to the rickshaw. And people would go right in. The person wouldn't even be out of their seat before someone else came in. So he tried to negotiate space and he wouldn't really get the space. After 2 times, about half the group became irate. They were like, can't we just walk back? But it's like, not everyone can walk back. And it's like, well, yes, not everyone can walk back, but for those who can we walk back? So it's like, yeah, it's like we're going back to where we were. So I ended up joining that group because I can walk, even though it is on my bucket list to ride a rickshaw, but I've got plenty more days left in India. I'm sure the chance will come up again. I ended up walking down and we met some groups that had ridden the rickshaw ahead of us. As we were walking back, one of the groups that took the rickshaw passed us, so we waved to them and it was nice. We ended up taking a group picture, and one of the ladies has a cane that she can sit on. I was impressed by it. She said it was the best $40 that she ever spent, and in all honesty, if I ever get to a point in life where I need to use a cane, I think that's what I'm gonna get. Also, around the Red Fort, there were lots of dogs. There were about medium-sized dogs, I would say slightly smaller than a lab. They're not labs though, but they're just lying all over the place, and on the way out, there was this one dog who was just fast asleep in the middle of the crowd, and it's like, oh, to have the amount of relaxation that that dog is feeling right now, that would feel amazing. Our next stop is the Gandhi Memorial. So when Mahatma Gandhi died, they cremated his body, and at the site where they cremated his body, they built a memorial to him. They have an eternal flame that's going for 24 hours a day. Not everyone in the group went to the memorial. We were told there was about 20% of the walk that we did at the Red Fort, but some people couldn't even walk that far at this point. Most of us did go though. Once we got there, right across from the entrance, we listened to our tour guide tell us a little bit about Mahatma Gandhi, who, even though he is the father of India, the Bapu of India, we were told, he did not spend his entire life in India. His parents sent him to Britain to become a lawyer. He became a lawyer. Then when he started practicing law, he came down to South Africa. He saw apartheid going on. He didn't like what he was seeing. He saw lots of problems, but he ended up with some sort of issue with some of the people there that he came back to India. And then when he came back to India, he saw some of the societal problems he saw in South Africa. So he worked on trying to fix them through nonviolence. We were told that Mahatma Gandhi was beloved in India, but I think it's safe to say that he's beloved around the world. Pretty much anyone who has heard of India has heard of Mahatma Gandhi. Even people who may not have heard of India have probably heard of Mahatma Gandhi. There are actually 2 different ways in which you could experience the memorial. There was a bridge, and you could walk up on the bridge and see it from a bit of a height, or you could get even closer and walk around the flame, but if you went under the bridge, you had to take off your socks and shoes. We were told to take 20 minutes to explore the compound and then come back. I was of the opinion, like several other ladies, of why not do both. So I started with the taking my shoes off thing, because how often is it that you get to walk around barefoot in a foreign country and it's not being related to water sports? It was interesting walking along the side. There was this yellow slatting in the stone walkway. It was strange. There was only one. It was about a foot wide. And I ended up asking the tour guide later on what that was for, and he said it was to help people with disabilities. It gives them a bit of a grip to grab on, to get a steadier footing when they're walking, which is good that they have that accessibility measure. I'm guessing the stone that they used to create the memorial is slippery when wet. There's also just squares of rocks covered in glass, which didn't make sense. In the Hindu religion, when someone gets cremated, it is a tradition to cremate towards a body of water because afterwards everyone takes a bath. So where Mahatma Gandhi is cremated used to be a river. It's not there anymore. I thought the rocks were there to represent where the river would have run, but no, it's just a design element. But what's nice is the moment that you start walking barefoot, there's this green floor covering that is put on top of the stone. So it gives a place that you're not necessarily touching the ground. I don't know if it's supposed to give the thing that's more hygienic. It was a mat with a bunch of holes in it. So I guess if it was raining, like people's feet wouldn't be wet, or maybe if people's feet had all sorts of problems, like athlete's foot or something like that, it wouldn't spread as easily. It could have also been to prevent their feet from burning on the stone. I did end up touching the stone offside just to see if there was much of a difference. There wasn't, but it was a difference to walk on something that was in the shade versus something that was in the sun. I could actually feel the degree difference in my feet. Before I got to walk around it though, I got stopped for an interview. There were these little school kids who wanted to ask a few questions. It sounded like they were doing it for school, and I was like, yeah, let me put my shoes in the little cubby first and then I'll answer your questions. And they were filming it. The person asked me these questions was this boy. I would estimate his age to be somewhere between 9 to 12 years old. He's a very articulate kid, and he asked me questions like, what's your name? Where are you from? He also asked me, what is your qualification? Which that one took me a bit of a moment to figure out what he meant by that. Because it's like, I am familiar with this word, yes, but I am not familiar with the way that you're using it. If someone were to ask me in the States, what are your qualifications? You wouldn't necessarily be asked, what is your qualification, without other things being asked ahead of time, like, what is it that you do? Or if you're in school, it's like, what were you studying? In the United States, a qualification would be like, I got my college degree. In India, that is how they ask you, what is it that you do for work? So afterwards, it's like, oh, YouTuber. And it turns out he's a YouTuber too. The kid asked me questions, so he was telling me about it, which, yeah, he was filming right then and there. And they also asked me how the people of India were treating me. And I told them that they were treating me very nice, which is true. But yeah, it's a nice little experience of interacting with school kids. I love interacting with little school kids out in the wild. After I did the interview, I walked around his internal flame, which is currently decorated with marigolds, which I think is because of the fact that Diwali happened a couple days ago. Although it could just be they're like that all the time. But there's a nice flower display by the flame. I went up to the bridge and I saw it from the bridge, and the ramp leading up to the bridge had a nice slope to it. And then I ended up going back to the group and I was the last one to arrive. The way that the purple hair worked for me was people knew I was missing. When we got back to the bus, we were told there was a restroom that we could use if we wanted to. You could also just go straight back to the bus as well. And so I decided to use the restroom because, like, I'm in India. Let's see how this is different. Up until now, all the restrooms I've tried have just been within the vicinity of the hotel. The hotel is catered to Westerners. I was curious, like, am I going to find a whole row of squat toilets? Is that what's going on here? And it was one of the strangest bathrooms I'd ever come across. If you saw that bathroom in the United States, your immediate assumption would be, oh, this building has been abandoned. So there were 3 open stalls that I could see when I went in. One had a squat toilet in it. The squat toilet had no door. So I looked in the next one, and the next one was more of a Western toilet, but there was a plastic bottle in the toilet bowl. Then I walked into the third one, and the third one had a panty liner inside the toilet bowl. It's like, okay, I don't know if that can flush through it, but I'm more willing to risk it with the panty liner than I am with the plastic bottle. The toilet itself didn't have a toilet seat. Had no toilet paper. It had no place to put toilet paper. It wasn't that there was no toilet paper available, it just wasn't even a consideration. So I ended up using it. Like, I didn't want to touch that toilet seat. I made it work. I didn't have any tissue, so it's like, okay, we'll just make it work cleaning myself from this. The water was running, fortunately, but while there were soap dispensers, the soap dispensers were not filled at all. So it's like, oh, I feel kind of grimy, because when you're in the United States and you're young, it's really drilled into you, wash your hands, this is how you use the bathroom. And it's like, this is completely different from how this event that I've done thousands of times in my life has gone. It's also just wild, the diversity here. Like, I'm staying at a hotel where the toilet has a bidet, and then I'm using, in the same day, a toilet that has no toilet paper available. On our way back to the bus, the valet, the concierge guy, with the red fort, he greeted us with a bottle of hand sanitizer. It struck me as mildly different. It's like, oh, this is part of the service. You just give hand sanitizer. I guess it's to make sure we stay well, which is a very nice consideration on their part. But after I came back from the Gandhi Memorial and there was no soap and he greeted me with the hand sanitizer, I was like, oh, thank you. I was very, very grateful for that. When I got on the bus, the money changer was there. We were told to hold off getting any rupees until today because our tour guide knew a guy that could get us changed for a better rate than we would get from other places. And there was also an ATM at the Gandhi Memorial, and some ladies tried the ATM there, but the ATM had no money. But we had the money changer there, and I ended up changing about $40 into rupees, which means I now have to spend $40 in India, which I'm probably going to spend that either at the market or the puppet place anyway. I didn't want to change too much because, as it turns out, it is against the law for people who are not Indians to take the rupee out of India. As a coin collector, I was not thrilled to hear this news. I would have loved to take some rupees home to just be part of my coin collection, but that's not how it's gonna go. After that, we ended up driving to the place where we were going to eat lunch. We ended up going to this restaurant. There was a restroom in the restaurant, and most of the ladies went to the restroom there, and I didn't go right when everyone else went. I ended up going while I was waiting for my food, and the restroom at the restaurant was a lot nicer than the restroom at the Gandhi Memorial. And I was like, oh, toilet paper's here. I saw a couple things on the menu that I was interested in trying, but the ordering process did not go as planned. It was the point of the day where we all just zoned out. It was like, oh, we've already experienced a lot today, and also it was hot. India is a little bit of a humid heat, so it's definitely like, you feel the heat. This shirt that I was wearing today, it almost felt too thick. I saw some things on the menu that I was unfamiliar with, and what I didn't realize until afterwards was that on the United States side of things, there's like, oh yes, the Indian accent can be very hard to understand. And I knew that I would have to listen carefully in order to make sure that I understood what was going on. But what I didn't consider is that my accent could be very hard for Indians to understand. I think there was a bit of a culture clash today because my intention was to ask about items on the menu before ordering. For two of them, I did have an option depending on what the answers were. For the first one, it was like there's this drink, it was like a tandai. From what I got, it was like a yogurty type of drink. It was with the lassi on the menu part. But all that the description said was an Indian favorite. So it's like, that could mean anything. But the person who was serving as our waiter ended up telling me that the restaurant had discontinued it. It has been eliminated. So I had another option in mind, so I asked for a grape cooler, and the grape cooler was amazing. It was like a fancy grape juice. And I love grape juice anyway. So that was gonna be a hit. There's this other dish. It was like the Tangori Murtika, I think it was called. It was a kebab, and there was chicken, and it had like lemongrass and some spices. And when I saw this, I think mint was involved with it as well. And when I saw the spices, I was like, okay, I can handle some spice, but I do have a limit on the spice. So if I ask the guy, like, how spicy is it from 1 to 10, and I can judge from there, then maybe I can make my own judgment, and then if it's too spicy for my taste, I'd just order something else. Because I saw something that said like creamy chicken coated in cheddar cheese, which looked amazing, but cheddar cheese felt like a cop-out from trying Indian cuisine, especially 2 days in. Even though it was a chef's favorite, it has a little chef's hat next to it. And it's like, okay, that would be there. So that was my intention. But when I was asking about the spiciness level, and the guy realized I didn't want it spicy, he's like, we can tell the chef to cut the spice down. So I ended up ordering my first choice there. I was like, okay. And then I also ordered some bread. Everyone else was ordering naan, but I saw something that said roti, so I was like, what was that? And I ended up ordering buttered roti, but he had trouble understanding what I was saying, so I had to point at it. Also, it was very hard to hear in that restaurant. It was the one point of the day where it's like, I wish I had my loops with me. I do have my loops with me on the trip, but they were in my backpack, which I had left on the bus. But yeah, we were told we have an hour in order to wait for our food, and it's like, well, we can eat fast, but it depends on getting the food. And I didn't realize I was the very last plate to come out. Our tour guide came over to ask, how's everyone enjoying our food? And it's like, well, I can't answer you. I don't have it yet. And he saw it. It's like, oh, let me figure it out. So he just asked about it. And I was told that mine took longer because the chef had to make it special because I was having the spice, which I didn't realize I was asking for a modification. I'm very thankful to the waiter for working with me. But then the tour guide also told me that the dessert that I was asking him about yesterday, this restaurant sells. It's like, okay, perfect, I'll take it. So when the person was asking for dessert, I asked if I could take the dessert to go, which he was like, okay. And I think there was some sort of communication barrier too. He did bring out the dessert to go when he brought out my check. And honestly, with the check, I got more than I would usually order, and it still costs cheaper than most meals that I get in the United States. I ended up finding out how much dollars it cost me because even though I'm seeing the price in rupees, and I have an app on my phone that can convert it, but also I get a text telling me every time I spent money, like how much money I spent, and when I saw it just said $16, it's like, simple. But it ended up being the right choice because I'm not sure I would have had time to eat the dessert, nor would have had the stomach space to eat the dessert right then. But yeah, my food took so long to make. Two of the other ladies served me part of their meals, so I had some mutton, which was amazing. The mutton was amazing. And another one of the ladies gave me some of her garlic noodles, which I tried, and they really overstuffed the portions on those dishes because they couldn't finish it. They both ate what they could. They asked for bowls to take their food back to the hotel so they could eat it later, and that would be their dinner for tonight. And the lady with the garlic noodles, she still had noodles left over, but they also had drinks that came in like a shake container. One woman had a chocolate shake and another woman had a cold coffee, and it came in the same glasses that you get like milkshake in. So they had a lot to drink from there. From what they told me, it was absolutely worth it. Both of their drinks were very, very good. From there, we went to the National Craft Museum. This was the best stop of the entire day. Unfortunately, I was not able to get any video recording of the craft museum because I saw a sign that said no photography allowed. Pictures from a mobile phone were allowed, so I took loads of pictures, but I don't have too many videos from the museum because they were banned, and I'm not going to do anything if I know that that's the rule. So we were taken in and we were given an audio guide, and we could stick around with the tour guide and have him explain things to us, but we could also just walk around on our own. And I mean, once I got the audio guide, I'm not typically an audio guide type of person, but it's like when you're in the place, why not just use it? Who knows what I'd learn, yeah. The craft museum has over 200 different types of art all around, and I was overloaded at that point. We only had an hour in the museum, and one of the ladies looked this up on TripAdvisor, and TripAdvisor says that the museum can be seen in 1 to 2 hours. If you're a craftaholic like me, I could have been there all day. Just taking my time, looking at some of the stuff. Maybe not all day, but at least 3 hours. Especially once I found out that they have craft people who are making crafts there on site, which I never made it to them. There was so much to see ahead of time, but there were lots of figurines and sculptures out of different materials. I think there was metal and wood carvings. We saw puppets, and the puppets we saw, our tour guide pointed out and said, these are the puppets you're gonna see being made in Japan. So now I've got like something to look forward to. There was so much stuff about textiles. They had 2 separate exhibit areas for textiles. So they had painted on fabric. I learned about brocade. What makes a fabric brocade rather than just a regular woven fabric is they double strand either the weft or the warp. So like one of the fibers that make up it actually gets doubled up, so it creates that embossed texture. There was Kantha, which was about embroidery art. They had a bunch of saris there. They had different types of silk and different types of wool and cotton right at the very beginning. They had fabric that was painted on. They talked about natural dyes. They have some fabric where it's a resist dye afterwards. It's like fabric dyeing means Pisaki eggs in a way. They put wax over the parts that they don't want to dye, and then they dye the fabric, and then they take off that, and then they dye the fabric. They cover the wax over different parts, and then they dye the fabric again, so that way they can get all sorts of different colors. There's also block printing. It's very good that this is at the beginning of the tour, because a lot of our go visit people who are doing crafts are happening later. So now we can go back and see like, oh yeah, I think a lot of the things that we're going to be seeing later on, we saw in the museum today. So it'll be like a nice callback. I did see a piece of Muslim artwork that was very strange in that it depicted living creatures. And it was like the Muslim version of the Garden of Eden, that triptych by Boyce. The textile work was just beautiful. Something that I saw that I wasn't expecting to see were cowrie shells. The cowrie shells is something that I associate with Africa, not with Asia. There must be a lot of interaction between countries that are in Africa and India across the Indian Ocean or around the coasts of those countries, because there were quite a few pieces with cowrie shells sewn on in ways that I've never seen them sewn on before. And I also found out one of the other ladies is really fond of cowrie shells too. So when she ended up walking up behind me and then I saw cowrie shells, I pointed them out to her. Once I realized that she was also interested in them, then I find the second textile part. And as I'm walking up, one of the other ladies of the tour is like, "This is the best part of the museum." It's like, ooh, okay. You saw even more fabric. Perhaps the best part, which I ran to the same time as the same lady who was fond of the cowrie shells, were these white dresses. They looked like wedding dresses. I saw the artist statement later on as something to do with sustainability. She used materials that weren't typically used to make her dresses, to use waste and give them a more unique look. It looks like something that someone would put down a runway, but you wouldn't necessarily wear in real life. I don't know if it's a certainty that I will ever find myself in a position where I am participating in a wedding as a bride. But if I were, some of those dresses are similar to dresses I would want to wear. It was at first hard to get to them because we were blocked by a bunch of benches. And the benches said, "Do not sit," but they did not say, "Do not step over." So I stepped over so I could get closer to the dresses and look at them closer. A couple of the other ladies joined me there too. Close to the end of the tour, when there's like 10 minutes left, it's like, okay, I need to walk my way to the bus. And I was like, I really hope there's an exhibit book because there's just so much artwork and I want a way to reference it later on. But when I walked into the one gift shop that was by the opening, there were no books being sold. So I ended up walking out without buying anything. Then I walked back to the bus and it was a calm ride home. We did get stuck in traffic at one point throughout the day. I forget if this happened on the way home or if it happened earlier in the day. But we came across the Muslims who were walking again and we're looking at them, they're looking at us, and they can see us looking at them. So several of them were like going like this or they were waving, so they waved back. There's also some incredible motorcycle Tetris going on as well. There was a gentleman who was delivering boxes. He had 2 stacks of cardboard boxes over 4 high, and they were balanced on the back of his motorcycle while he's going. It's like, how is he holding on to this? There's also a lady with a sari riding on the back of the motorcycle, a lady riding a sari on a motorcycle, that doesn't really surprise me as much because this is India. What surprised me was the fact that she was riding side saddle and she wasn't holding on to the person in front of her. It's like, how is she holding on? There was like another truck we saw. The truck was loaded up with fruit and there was a gentleman sitting on top of the fruit. It's like, I guess he feels secure. There was at least one motorcycle that had 4 people on it today, which I had seen before from watching Itchy Boot videos. Like sometimes there's 4 people sitting on a motorcycle. It's like, oh, that's happening here. But the traffic lights were different. One of the traffic lights had a timer on the top, so it showed how long the light would stay that color, which if it happened in the United States, I think there are some people who would really appreciate it and other people who would drive a little bit crazy. In the United States, you only have the countdown for the passengers. You never have that for the traffic light. We're going to have to pack up tonight because we are checking out of the hotel in the morning to move to our next stop, which is Agra. When I came back, I ended up taking some medicine. I went swimming again. The last time I went swimming, it was light out and this time it was dark, so I got to see how the pool looked in the dark. I did have to shake some bugs off of my bathrobe though when I came out. I took a shower. I didn't know what I wanted to eat, so I went to the bakery and I found out they served ice cream. So I had a raspberry and wine sorbet, which was very good. I also had a black currant sugar cane or whatnot. It's like a gummier Twizzler. Yeah. I really liked how it tastes. Black currant's really not a flavor that you get in the United States. They're more likely to substitute licorice, which licorice is a taste all of its own, but I like black currant better. I also got some gummy candy for later. They came in a nice adorable little box. It looks like a book. And that's been pretty much my day. So yeah, it was a very, very full day. But yeah, at this point, I'm having to wind my yarn into a ball because I'm getting this nonstop. And if I'm going to be in the car for 4 hours tomorrow for transportation, I don't want to deal with yarn tangles. I want to finish my project, which is this shawl or this wrap. I think I may have made the tangle worse there. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, when I came back from housekeeping today, the thing that I found very entertaining was how they redid the room. Pretty much every item that I had placed on their shelves or counter other than the table, they lifted the item up, they put a towel down, and then they put the item back. It took me a while to find my shoes because they moved where the shoes were, but they lifted my shoes up, they put a towel down, they lifted my phone up, and they put the towel down, they put my iPad there. The thing that caught my attention were my glasses, because not only did they put my glasses down, but they also put down a glasses cleaning tool. It's quite hilarious. Yeah, it was a very good day today.
We are not allowed to cut down the banyan tree. It's a spiritual tree. We worship leaves of banyan.
Oh, no, thank you.
only. No other bites.